All right, welcome. It's another morning in the United States, and I'm here joined by VeganPostMortem. Welcome to the stream. VPM, where are you logging in from? Which country are you in?
Oh, I'm staying anonymous online, so
You're a what?
I'm anonymous online, so I'd appreciate you to.
Oh, okay. No worries. Sorry, I do apologize for that.
No problem. Thank you for having me on your channel.
Of course, somewhere on planet Earth. And
yeah,
awesome.
Maybe. Some people accuse me of being a Martian, so I don't know.
Okay, cool. So today we're gonna hopefully get to talk about Vegan Postmortem's channel, and then also some of the different areas of interest on her channel, and things like that. So is there anything that you want to talk about first off in terms of like just introducing your channel and saying anything about yourself?
Sure. My channel is a little bit dead right now, but up until 6 months ago, when I was still not that badly burnt out, I was making short videos about certain specific aspects of whether vegan advocacy or horrendous animal practices, going really specifically about a certain subject. I'm non-binary, so they them would be better for me.
Sure.
If that's okay.
Sure, of course. I do apologize.
No problem.
I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Cool. So today, hopefully we'll kind of talk about some of the different logical fallacies and things like that. I know that VPM is not wanting to be perceived as too much of an expert, but you know, I think for anyone familiar with their content, they make a lot of really logic-oriented content. So I think, you know, I consider it a privilege to be able to ask, you know, some things about it. But I do understand that, you know, we're all learning. I think maybe a good place to start would be about definitions. You know, language and definitions and logic are something that I think is really important in the context of vegan advocacy. For example, I did a live outreach thing the other day where I was talking about oppression and slavery. And I wanted to basically bring people around to this idea that non-human animals are victims of slavery or that they're victims of oppression. But I kind of thought to myself, well, before I do that, I need to establish a working definition with the individuals coming up to the social experiment about what oppression or slavery actually is. And I think that we need to really make sure about precise definitions when it comes to any kind of debate, because otherwise it's kind of like there's this veil over this central object that different sides are kind of talking about. And if that veil isn't lifted and clarified and congealed, then people can kind of miss what each other are saying, because it's kind of, we're pointing at the same thing, but saying different things. Do you think that formal logic kind of mirrors this idea in a way of needing precise definitions? Like one thing I find, for example, is like with name the trait. Let me give an example. People will say, what's the morally relevant difference between humans and non-human animals that justifies the respect for human life, but makes it okay to make a sandwich out of a non-human animal? And people will say, well, humans are humans and animals are animals. So it's just like, they'll literally just say A is A and B is B without talking about how they reached the conclusion. They'll just repeat the premises to you and expect that to somehow contain some kind of conclusion. Do you find that a lot, like, because of the way that you think in those videos, that's influenced your argument, like effectiveness of your arguments, or how you perceive arguments from non-vegans?
Yeah, I think being a bit of a word nerd definitely changes the way I argue about things. But I do think there are two sides to this coin of a definition. First of all, if you have the time and the cooperation of the other person to actually sit down and source out What do they mean by a certain word, and what do you mean by that word when you say it? And I don't know, find a compromise, or find problems within each other's definitions, whatever. But that's cool. But most of the time, when we do actual activism, that's not even possible. And that's where using a bit of a fuzzy language can backfire sometimes, in my opinion. For instance, you used the word respect. I hear activists use this word when it comes to animal advocacy, so respect animals. I don't know if there is a concrete definition of that word that actually entails all the things that we want for animals to have, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if the word respect is well defined even in a human context. So it's culturally dependent as well. And then for instance, avoid using that word, and I'm not sure what did you mean by it?
That's a great question. Well, yeah, I mean, I appreciate your, thoughtful and conscientious listening. I think what I was going to say was respect the rights. But then I was like that. I kind of caught myself maybe 1 second too late in terms of applying the critical thinking to how humans regard other humans, generally speaking. But yeah, you're right that does contain. There is an issue therein, because I guess I'm trying to understand what is the point where we need to, like, I guess we need to just always be on alert. We always need to be very precise in our language, because I think the less precise we are, the more we leave this kind of wiggle room for non-vegans to kind of for them to kind of, I don't want to say weasel out, because that's not a very vegan term.
To go on a tangent. It gives them room to go on a tangent and take you with them, right? If you're not precise about words and say, well, this is what I'm saying. I'm saying animals deserve the same, some of the same rights that humans have. In fact, those are basic rights. I think most human rights that are not like voting and driving and all that shit, they're just basic animal rights. And then we add rights that are specific to humans on top of that. We just haven't realized it yet. All the traits that grant us the rights, like the right to life and all of that stuff, animals also have. So it's not even a matter of granting animals those rights. It's basically just saying how it is. Those animals deserve those fucking rights for the same reasons that humans have. So, but on the other hand, so it's using a word that isn't really clear could give somebody an in to go on a complete tangent, or to say, well, I'm doing the same thing. I'm respecting animals by expecting my butcher to kill them quickly. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yes, using a precise language is good sometimes. Sometimes, though, and this is where an activist should probably gauge on who's standing in front of them. Sometimes using something less precise could be actually extremely beneficial. If you see that the person in front of you is really good at catching up or doing the golden rule thing, then not going into details about the specific things, for instance, that go on in slaughterhouses or in dairy farms and all of that shit. Just saying, well, dairy cows are kind of screwed, you know. Sometimes it's just it's there for them immediately. They don't even need to hear what's really going on. So it's really a matter of an activist style, in my opinion, and who is the person that's standing in front of them, basically.
Yeah, I think you're definitely making some really great insights there. And I think when we use, for the lack of a better term, maybe virtue ethics type terminology, such as respect, when we kind of appeal to people's desire to respect or be quote unquote compassionate or things like that, maybe we're kind of buying into an idea about this person which may or may not actually be the case, or they may or may not see those words in the same way. I think maybe it's, based on what you're saying, I'm thinking that maybe it's only safe to bring those words about, like those nouns that pertain, like, to things like justice, compassion, nonviolence, benevolence, stewardship, all those things. Maybe it's only best to use them once someone has kind of like arrived at it from a bottom up kind of perspective, or at least elucidated what they mean precisely about that in terms of actions. It's maybe best not to bring that back in terms of trying to reveal some kind of contradiction in their behavior until they've been very clear about how they understand those words, like what they understand those words to mean.
Yeah. Another way that I think most street activists take right now is to give them a baseline of what they mean, what the people themselves mean by those words, by asking first about humans, whether humans deserve this right, that right, and so forth, and giving them hypotheticals about humans, and then bringing it into the animal kingdom through there. And then a person has an idea in their mind what those words actually mean, without sitting and going through the definitions too laboriously. They have the concept of what they mean respecting humans, for instance, right? And if you substitute animals in there, that's another way. And then you don't have to be, I don't know, I wouldn't use respect, but that's my opinion. I think however activists decide to talk to other people is all right. They're doing something, so.
But you do bring up a great point. When you say respect, like you said, people could say that I go to the butcher who kills these animals respectfully. And then now we're tasked with the business of almost like backpedaling in a way and saying, oh, well, that's not the kind of respect I was talking about. Or we say, well, do you think that's respectful? And we're having a conversation that's almost just like a teacher, beating a kid with a ruler or something like that, talking about, oh, you're not being respectful. And we lose sight of the big picture about justice. And now I'm kind of thinking, well, then what is it? Maybe I should ask you how you view veganism. Do you take an approach where you are a moral objectivist and you believe that there are certain rights, tangible or untangible, that humans innately possess, by virtue of being that they're intrinsic to humans, that and that non-human animals just basically deserve those same rights to the extent that they would be benefactors of those results, of those rights?
So I'm not sure where I stand on most things. I'm a moral subjectivist, but not the way most people use it. I think the way most people use it is, well, listen, those are my morals and fuck off, right? Whatever horrible stuff they say, they just say, well, those are my morals. Morals are subjective. I think actual moral relativism, I think so, yeah. I'm not incredibly read on the subject. It's actually just pointing out that morals wouldn't exist without a mind going through it, right? But I am leaning a little bit on objectivism only in one point, and I don't know, every time I talk about it with people, I just kind of can't get to a conclusion about it. I can't reconcile it. So there is a body bleeding in a corner, right? Somebody is dead or dying in a corner. A moral relativist would say, well, I don't know. It's bad for me that there is a body in a corner if I did it, but it's not. Oh, it's bad for the victim, but it might be not bad for the perpetrator. And I can't reconcile it, both because I've read enough psychology, I think, to call bullshit on that, and because, and that's where I'm a bit of a moral objectivist just on this point, is there's a fucking body in the corner. How can it not be objectively bad? Somebody's lying there, suffering or dead or whatever, you know? So how can the action not be bad? But that's pretty much the only thing that I just can't get my head around, how I can reconcile with moral relativism, sort of. Yeah.
Is there something about that specific example that has a particular relevance to your calculation or estimation of the objectivity or subjectivity of rights, or could there?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, like the example about the body in the corner. It brings up all sorts of considerations in my mind about pain, pleasure, the duty to act versus, no duty to act. So I guess I'm wondering what it is about the body bleeding. Like, could we substitute something else instead? I'm not asking you to. I'm just saying, would it be possible, or would that change too many variables for the calculation?
I still don't understand the question. Sorry.
Okay.
Substitute it with what?
Another scenario. I mean, for example, if we are, I guess, first off, I should say that in terms of and if I understand correctly, your position on the realism of rights is that they exist in the mind, but beyond that, they're maybe, I don't want to cast too wide of a net here, but they're real, about as real as anything that exists in the mind. Would that be fair to say?
I don't know. When I talk about rights, I'm still not sure I understood your questions. I'm sorry. When I talk about rights, I talk about legal rights. I just haven't found a good enough definition of natural rights. Not definition, but like a good enough explanation on what it is and why we should care about it, or what is the existence of this thing? Where does it come from? So I don't usually talk about natural rights. It would be incredibly useful if that was an actual real concept. So if somebody has something interesting to say about that, please do. But I just use sentience as a substitute for natural rights, and whatever traits a sentient being has that make it prudent to give them legal rights. That's how I think about it. As for substituting the body in the corner is only an example. I'm talking about, well, how can it be? How can having a victim, right, an actual victim by the definition of victimhood, can reconcile having the perpetrator not have moral
responsibility,
fault? Yeah. I'm a bit. It's kind of breaking my mind for the past year or so. So I don't know how to reconcile it yet. Yeah. I probably need to read more. I just don't have time. So.
Yeah. Regarding the first thing you said, I think that's pretty much what's the word? I guess spot on with the way that I see rights. I don't think that rights exist in the way that Jupiter does. I don't think that it exists independently of a mind, to ascribe these rights or to recognize these rights. But I think that having a mind and being around other beings with minds like you said, kind of makes it prudent to, the way I've always put it is to behave as though those rights exist. So it's a little bit of a semantic nuance, but in some cases it's kind of not semantic at all. It's also very literal. And the way that you phrased it is just to recognize it legally speaking. Which I think that's pretty much what I'm saying too when I say it's a good idea to behave as though those exist. When I say a good idea, I mean, like, that would be something that would and should be legally encouraged as well.
Yeah, I think that would be an amazing shift. I think it's kind of a little bit might be happening soon as well. If dogs reach, so I don't know if to talk about this because Patrick is going to do a video about it. So I'm going to leave it. Sorry.
Okay.
There's a thing. Everybody go to Foolproof Mastery. He's going to make an incredible video about animal rights in the legal system, in American legal system. It's going to be incredible.
That's great. I'll look forward to that. I'm subscribed to that channel. And I don't know if you're aware of it, but for example, in the last, was it maybe in the year 2020, when Donald Trump was the president of the US, he passed a law stating, it's called like the Dog and Cat Meat Ban Act or something like that. And he didn't make it federally legal to eat dogs or cats, but he made it federally legal to trade their flesh. I'm not sure if he outlawed like dog or cat milk industry, for example, though. Like I think they can maybe still be part of industry. Like I think it just pertains to the flesh aspect of it. But yeah, I always talk about that when I talk about speciesism. I'll talk about either that law, or I'll talk about how people can get in trouble if they like beat a dog, for example. You can go to jail, or on the opposite side of that, how you can win a medal at a fair for slaughtering a pig.
Or chasing a fucking calf and wrestling to the ground at the speed of light while riding on a horse's back. Jesus.
Right. Even this terminology we use, like, slaughtering a pig, things like that, it almost like, it kind of disturbs me how easily it rolls off our tongue. Whereas if we said like slaughtering a dog, it just almost like in the tonality, in the intonation, it almost is more like ghastly, when we even think about like, oh, a dog is getting slaughtered, but it's just become such a normalized part of our life that we just kind of think like that's what happens to pigs, which is such a shame, considering they're all just innocent. What do you think about that word innocent? Do you think that we can apply that to non-human animals? I always say that they are amoral beings. Like, I say that they're not capable of wrongdoing. I don't see not the non-human animal kingdom, for the lack of a better word, as being capable of ethical, moral decisions. I guess I see them as moral patients. What do you think about that?
So I'm of a double mind there. I recognize that perhaps some or most animals are not capable of making a moral judgment. By the way, I'm not strong on that conviction. I think I saw enough videos of animals having taken a moral action, even lions. So I'm not entirely convinced that they are amoral, right? I think we're kind of simplifying the individuals there. On the other hand, and that's where my problem with the victim coming in, right? I don't know if it matters if they are a moral patient or not, because there is a victim there, right? A lion is victimizing another animal, and I don't see a reason to say, well, that happens in nature, right? That happens there. it would be too hard to stop that, or it would be too cruel to stop that. Which is, of course, I'm not supporting killing predators, but
I was,
I
I
have to
was
say,
afraid to ask.
no, it's not a problem. I have a video about it on my channel
Oh,
where I
okay.
say
Right on.
I'm not supporting calling predators, but I can't just stand aside and say, well, that's not my problem either. There's victim there. And that victim is, in fact, more innocent than the lion. And I don't really care if the lion knows what they're doing or not, if we can intervene, if we can find a way to intervene there. I don't know, to feed the lion something else. Or
Airdrop some Beyond Meat with taurine in it.
yeah, maybe. I don't know. I really don't. I don't know if it's okay. So here's the thing. I don't know if it's possible to solve this conundrum, but even that doesn't matter. The matter of ethics is to say this is a bad thing that's happening there, regardless of whether you can solve that issue or not. Veganism is easy. Veganism is easily solvable for most people on Earth, right? It's easy. I mean, animal farming is easily fixable by veganism. The problem of the horrible shit that's going on in nature, it's probably not as easily fixable. It could be completely unfixable. It could be that there is nothing we can do. But just taking a stance and saying that is not good, it doesn't have to be related to a practical solution.
I see what you're saying. At some level, though, I think people can maybe envision a world where we have gotten veganism to be widespread among humankind. We're all vegan. We're all sitting on our butts, just thinking about what's the next big problem to solve. And we're looking out at lions killing other animals, and we're saying that's bad. That's not a good thing. And the people who are saying, well, this is an impossible to solve problem because we can't fix it completely. There'd be people saying, well, but we can do something about it. Something is better than nothing. And then they would feel like, hypocrites for saying that that's a bad thing, but refusing to, quote unquote, change their actions to align with their values and do something about
Those
it.
are not our actions, though, right? This is the thing. We are not a party to this nature thing. We're only a party to it for I don't know, distracting it. I don't know, doing stuff to it, right? That's when we're a party to. We are not responsible for the predator-prey relationship. So somebody in my comments, and don't remember who it is, but it was one of the more interesting conversations in the comments that I had. They said that it could be that it would be easier to get carnists on the side of recognizing that the predator-prey relationship is fucked up than it is to make the same person recognize that what they are doing to animals is fucked up. So it actually could be like an entry point. And I agree with them completely. If you are not morally responsible, it seems easier to recognize when something is wrong. When you are morally responsible, you get into cogdis, you get into cognitive dissonance of doing a fucked up thing. And the easiest way to get out of cognitive dissonance is not to change your own actions, is to change your mind about the fucked up action. It's usually minimizing the severity of the action, or just saying it doesn't matter at all, and all kind of stuff.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of how, I forget where I heard it, but when vegans say to non-vegans, like, what if it was you in the slaughterhouse? I've heard it suggested in the past that it might be better to actually say, what if it was someone you love, or what if it was your friend in the slaughterhouse? Do you think that there's some kind of correlation between these two things, or are they parallel, or do you think that that's maybe relying on a different type of emotional processing or different type of logic?
Well, it must be, because the internal processes towards ourselves and towards other people, they must be different, right? The question is, which one is better? And frankly, I don't know. So I come from actually feminist activism. And at a certain point, we came to the conclusion that saying to a man, what if it was your daughter, your wife, your mother, is kind of fucked up. I mean, it's happening to a human being. It doesn't matter what is the relationship to a person it is. Yeah. Now, that's in theory. It's more correct to say it's happening to a human being, right? Or it's happening to an animal. But psychologically, what happens to a person when they hear one or the other, frankly, I have no idea. I usually go about it in the following manner. Whenever a person says, well, this slaughter is humane or something like that, or hunting is incredibly humane, I ask them, would you take that place? It usually leads to hilarious situations, and it's a win-win, because either they say yes, and then it's a completely suicidal, unrealistic position. They basically say, yeah, I'm willing to be killed at a fraction of my age in this way. Or it leads to them saying no, and then you NTT them the way, ask them, so what's the difference between you and that victim, right?
Yeah, this kind of reminds me a lot when you gave the example of saying like that, it doesn't matter if it's their daughter or wife or whatever in this scenario. It kind of makes me think of the thing that a lot of vegans get pushed into, where we say like, when we get asked these questions about valuing different lives, the comparison, and we'll say that we'll eventually kind of get pushed into saying that we value certain beings more because they're more familiar to us. Somebody might ask like, would you rather save the life of your dog or some random dog 2,000 miles away? And, I think 9 times out of 10, we'd probably say that we'd rather save the dog in our life. It also makes me think of this idea of personhood and someone's, and the hierarchical nature of saying like human being or something like that, or fellow human. That kind of also implies this little bit of this relational thing. When I did that thing about oppression, and in past conversations as well, people kind of appealed a lot to the human species membership and saying like, that's a human being, it's wrong. They're kind of like one of us. But then there's this othering that happens with the non-human animals. And we run into this issue where we kind of, even by using the word like dehumanize, we're kind of knocking the non-human animals down a peg or several pegs. And on the contrary, if we use the term animal to refer to humans, then we do get kind of accused of dehumanizing. So I've heard the term just someone used, like in Name the Trait, for example, or not Name the Trait, I guess, but this idea of, how do you compassionately kill someone who doesn't want to die, when addressing the humane slaughter arguments. And then the non-vegans a lot of times will get tripped up on that word someone. And I've thought about this. Is it better to say a being? Is it better to say a sentient being? I want them to think about humans, and I want them to make that connection. It's the make the connection trademark. We want them to make the connection. But how do we do that in a way that doesn't equate the two, doesn't get into an argument about equating humans and non-human animals, but just makes the comparison evident in its fairness?
Yeah. So here's the thing. It's do or don't. It's a terrible predicament here. So calling an animal someone and the your opponent getting stuck on that, it's for me, it's usually an escape route, right? If somebody, after saying that, well, someone, I thought you were talking about humans,
Yeah.
and ask them, well, are animals or someone or something? And if they say something, that's what I say, well, thanks. I think I know everything about you now. And finish the conversation. Frankly, I don't have the time for this bullshit most of the time. Some people say there's something in the middle, or try to whistle out of it. But I think using the word someone is incredibly important, because and I don't see how it's equating, right? Because so in philosophy, I think people talk about objects, and they call animals and humans objects as well, because it's before anything, it's an object, and then you imbue it with traits. I think that's how I look at it, at least. So you have two objects. One is a human, one is an animal, right? Where was I going with this?
Just saying that just because they're both someone's doesn't mean that we're equating them.
Yeah. So you have two objects. One is a human. It has a name of human. One is a dog, for instance, right? I can say a human is a someone, and I can say an animal is a someone, and that wouldn't equate them in the slightest, because a human object has more traits than just being a someone, right? Someone indicates, I don't know, to me it indicates all the things that a sentient being has, right? Someone worth of moral consideration. Something is a rock, is a plant, is a thing that does not require moral consideration. And I don't see a middle in there. Perhaps we can argue that certain non-sentient animals could be a middle, but I don't see why. I don't see, like, maybe we can disambiguate animals. Maybe animals is too much of a fuzzy word to include all the species with different stages of cognition. I don't know. Sentience, I think, is not spectrum. I think it's an on and off switch.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
In that situation, I think everything, all objects that are sentient are someone, all objects that are not sentient are something. And frankly, who gives a shit? It's a tangent again, but in this case, I don't know how to bring it back to the conversation. So we found our flaw.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I try to avoid bringing up sentience because I think well, I guess before we get into that, I wanted to say about the someone and the personhood. I tend to try to make the argument that non-human animals are people, and I tend to try to emphasize they're having a subjective experience on Earth. As far as the supposedly or possibly non-sentient animals are concerned, I don't get into that at all. I try as much as I can to just avoid the topic altogether. It's like one of those loopholes and one of those kinds of things that I almost wish just wasn't even something that would snag in my brain when I talk about animals and the fact that we are all sentient. And when we, if people are willing to consider the lives and the subjective experiences of plants, I refuse to believe that there could be a plant that has sentience where there's an animal who doesn't. It doesn't seem to register in my brain at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, by the way, I don't know if biologically it's completely ridiculous for plants to have sentience, in the same way that it's not biologically completely ridiculous for an animal to have sentience. But I agree with you. I usually avoid it I do usually make sure to, when I talk about animals, to write a sentient animal. I do use the word sentient in front of animal more yes than no. So
Yeah, I think
just
it's
to
good
make
for the
sure
sake
that
of
I'm,
accuracy. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. I try to do the same. I do think in terms of kind of logical syllogisms and want to be precise whenever I'm making a claim. I try to avoid hyperbole as much as possible. So, with this idea of the dehumanization of, or I guess I guess this is where I'm going. Like with non-human animals, is it harmful to use the word, for example, dehumanization? Does that somehow imply that we're lowering that human who's being dehumanized to a lower status, presumably that of a non-human? And maybe I know that you had made a video about deanimalization. If you want to say something about that, I think that would be awesome.
Sure. So the dehumanization process is, I don't know, it sounds like a big word that only racists and horrible people do, but it's actually something that we do all the time, all of us. It's one of our quirky processes that humans do, right? Somebody goes in front of you in a line that you're standing in. You're dehumanizing them in your mind. And that's what it is. Dehumanization is a process in your mind, in how you view a person who does something to you. And it has to be some kind of negative interaction before you dehumanize somebody, right? And what it actually does, again, in your mind, it says nothing about the person. You're basically making shit up about that person, right? So the animalization, the way I define it, and I'm probably not the first one to do it, but I couldn't find too much of a source material on that, is kind of the same way. We are making stuff up about animals, which are, first of all, not true, right? And second of all, we are doing it not unprovoked. We are doing it only to the animals whom we want to make the other, whom we depend on making the other, right? So animals that farmed animals are definitely de-animalized. People say they can't feel. Dairy cows are bad mothers. All kinds of situation. So we're making shit up about them to make them less of an animal. So we're de-animalizing them in comparison to, for instance, dogs. In that video, I argue that dogs should be brought up to a human level status, in my opinion, just based on the research and on our perception of dogs. And since dogs and cows, when they are given a chance, are incredibly similar, I think both of them, at the least, should be considered to be on the same level. But at the most, I do argue for legal personhood, right? Even if it's not, again, this natural personhood, which I don't really know how to define better than just saying this object is sentient, right? But it gets worse, I argue in that video. We not only do we make shit up about those animals in order to de-animalize them, we are also causing them the damage that reinforces this perception of them, that they are stupid, for instance. Well, of course, they are more stupid than the dog, because dog socializes with humans or with other dogs from a very young age. A baby animal in fact, in all farming, is not allowed to socialize with older animals who can teach them stuff. So we are creating the problem where they are more stupid, less able to socialize. and all other stuff, right? So it's our fault always.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that. I had seen this image once that I used to share around, where there was a close-up of the eyes of a pig, and the eyes of a pig in a slaughterhouse and the eyes of a pig in a sanctuary. And it was just showing kind of the difference in their demeanor. And people always refer to chickens as being like these kind of crazy, kind of chaotic minded, unintelligent animals. And there's just these ideas. There's ideas about pigs being lazy and dirty, and a lot of these things are because of the conditions in which we keep them or our misunderstandings about them. There's a kind of mixture of indifference toward their suffering, and then also a little bit of disdain.
Yeah.
I know it's been said before that the opposite of love is indifference, and that by simply not caring about the plight, I guess, of these farmed animals, that that's basically the opposite of love being put forth. But I do think that there is some kind of hatred as well, because I feel like it's hard for humans to be violent and to be okay with violence unless there is some actual hatred. And I think this is kind of like that bruised underside of the fruit, that really shameful spot among humanity, that like we're actually not just processing these animals, not just slaughtering them, but we're in fact attacking them. We are literally attacking them. Like we are acting as though they are enemy combatants in war with us. And this kind of highlights, in my view, the absurdity of welfarism, of being quote unquote animal rights activists or vegan welfarists, where we just completely presuppose that they basically deserve what's happening to them. And that just boils my blood.
Yeah, well, that's the crux of dehumanization. That's what it is. Now, it's not one thing, right? It's a process. In order for a soldier, for instance, to be able to get up and kill somebody, they have to create an environment in their mind where it's okay. And not only okay, it's preferable to create an environment that it's actually good and virtuous to kill the other person on the other side. That's the crux of dehumanization. That's what it's there for. Or that's what we use it for, right? It's there to create all kinds of stuff, right? And it's something that you can actually, once you are considering it, you can actually fight. You can do a reverse process, something that I personally had to do and still have to do sometimes, because I was born into an incredibly racist family. The best way to get yourself out of it is to recognize, well, all this shit that I heard about other people, it's probably not true. There's no such a thing that a group of people are exactly the same, right? So saying those people are this thing, it's illogical almost, right? So you have to almost reverse engineer yourself out of that state of mind by saying, well, it can't be true, it's illogical, and therefore I should probably meet the person and talk to them, right? It's probably not true what my mind popped up when I see a certain person doing a certain thing. And again, those things crop up when there's something negative going on. Nobody is racist because something positive is going on, right? So nobody would be for killing animals if we didn't get something from it. So the entire thing is a circular creation, right? We get something from killing animals. We are made to think that we have to even get it, right? And it's a monster that feeds itself. It's fucking shame.
Yeah, viewing them as resources, I think, puts that incentive there. And then, the de-animalization process, it's literally in the word, like inanimate object, inanimate, like anima. We have to make them non-anima, non-animal in our minds in order to be okay with that that process that's happening to them. And I think you're really making a really good point about the state in which we put them, and then how we kind of blame them for it. There's an academic paper about the cultural genocide of non-human animals, and I think that this is kind of what we're speaking to. We basically take away their abilities to have culture, have a culture that's meaningful to them, where they're able to express love to each other, and then using that almost as ammunition to continue attacking them and continue disregarding their experiences as insignificant or instinct oriented, and all the other things that kind of like push them more in our minds toward constructs surrounding objects rather than like persons.
Yeah, but it gets even worse than that. I know now after making that video, because now I have an Instagram account called Homesteaders, where I basically spy on homesteader Reddits and get the stuff from there and
And a
publish it.
homesteader, if you could clarify, is that like a person making a farm, like a small farm in their house kind of thing?
Yeah, like off grid. Some of them do it for their own consumption. Some of them actually sell it as well. All the stuff that they produce. They are vegan homesteads, but as much as I saw, it's a very small community. And the non-vegan ones, well, they kind of have no choice. Those are just, most of them didn't grow up on a farm, right? Most of them is just people living their lives in the city, getting tired of it for some reason and wanting to retire on a land in seclusion, to be off grid and all that stuff. Most of them are incredibly unsuccessful, and they still have to have their day jobs. But it really helps because they have animal slaves. So animal slaves kind of take care of themselves, or they die, most likely, a lot. On the farms of homesteaders. And they are put, those people who didn't grow up on farms and weren't 4-H kids and stuff like that, they are put in a situation all of a sudden from being city kids and almost never interacting with those specific animals and thinking they are just, absolute trash. All of a sudden they meet those animals, right? And they... something interesting happens there. They do start recognizing that most of those animals are individuals, especially chickens. They rave about chickens being individuals. But then they kill them anyways. But then they exploit them anyways. Yeah. So something else is going on there. And it's again coming from the fact that they have made the decision to exploit this animal, and they are dependent on the production. So it's just sometimes bifurcated in the middle. This is an individual, I'm going to process them. Yeah. Right.
I was saying, just by having made that decision, though, sorry to interrupt you there, they don't get rid of their cognitive dissonance. That cognitive dissonance worsens, after they meet those individuals. They gain an appreciation for them. We see a lot of ridiculous BS from people who act like they're treating these animals like family and then chopping off their heads. An interesting thing that what you said reminds me of is this video that I had seen. I think it was on maybe Vice News, where they had, it was called like City Hipsters Go and Kill Their Food for the First Time or something like that.
It was on BuzzFeed, I think. Pretty sure it was on BuzzFeed.
Okay, so yeah, you probably saw that.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of this other statistic that I read about what made people go vegan. And supposedly, according to this, people are actually more inclined to go vegan by meeting one of the animals who are typically farmed for food in their country, as compared to watching a documentary or having a vegan friend, or seeing a like Cube of Truth type thing, like an outreach event. Um, and it's hard for me to understand the forces at play here, where we're given this information that, okay, meeting these animals is really helpful for getting people to go vegan because they get to meet them, they know that they're individuals. But then how is it the case that people who grow up on farms as children, where they're slitting chickens' throats at 6 or 7 years of age, or they're just seeing it happening all around them, is it, become kind of some of the most hardened carnists and are least likely to change, and they end up going on to participate in more cruel things a lot of times, like rodeos and hunting. Almost makes you think that like they need to almost have some kind of degree of sensitization in an early age. Like they need not be desensitized, and then later on, when they're adults who are not used to being surrounded by violence, then be shown the amount of violence that they're complicit in, because otherwise it's almost like violence just becomes a way of life, and it's harder to extract their thinking out of that mentality.
Yeah. So I think I know what's going on there. Maybe. Right. So again, let's take everything with a grain of salt. So I've been reading about the process of change. I'm still incredibly burnt out, so I don't record videos anymore. But the script is almost ready on the process of change. And one of the biggest enemies of change are something that is called automated knowledge. This is the type of knowledge that you have in case of just being a living person from birth. And it's something that you always come back to when you're challenged, right? So the 4-H kids and kids that grew up on farms, they recognize, I reckon, more than most that animals are individuals. I think there is also some kind of twisted actual love going on there. I do think it's actual weird love.
Weird, yeah.
But the thing that they go back to in their minds, and they must to do what they do, is we have to do this. We are the heroes who feed the world, or we are the heroes who live off grid and are sustainable and all of that shit. All that stuff is automated knowledge.
It's like we're the ones who understand them. We can't leave them up to be under the care of these city slicker people. We're the ones who get them and stuff like that.
You know what I'm saying. There you go. Yeah, exactly. Ask any farmer, do you like slaughtering animals? Do you like raising animals for slaughter? They'll say almost with tears in the fucking eyes that no, it's incredibly hard. They know these animals. They know their grandfathers and the entire genetic line of those animals, in case of small animals, for instance, or in case of large as well, right? Because they kill them incredibly young. So no, they don't like to do this. So ask them, what the fuck are you doing then? Why are you doing this? I'm feeding people, they say.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying it's almost rotational, right? It's a problem that creates itself and then feeds itself. And the two sides are working together, and they don't even know about it. The farmers are working with those demands, the people who demand this food. And both of them are saying this is needed, this is natural, this is what we should do because we've been doing it for many years, and all of that stuff, right? All the stuff that we know and love that is being thrown at us 10,000 times a day. That's the relationship. If you break that relationship, everything topples. But we can't break it through because they feed each other all the time.
Yeah, there's a definite resistance to kind of see what the roots of a lot of these problems are, and almost like there's this dynamic of the people who are promoting and propagating that kind of mentality. There's this kind of antiquated way of just being very happy with the way things are and being kind of anti-intellectualism, anti-progress. I mean, there's people who denigrate in the US, there's people who denigrate the act of recycling by saying that it's like a gay thing to do. And obviously that's problematic on many levels because it's homophobic for one, but also, it's the consequences environmentally speaking. There's this like culture of masculinity, especially like kind of in the southern US, in the heartland, where a lot of the farming practices are going to feed the nation. That these things are the jobs of these, worrying about animals, and the word sentience doesn't even make it into the conversation. Just worrying about animals is this like pink hat lefty liberal nonsense kind of thing. And you mentioned that these farmers, in many cases, even calling them farmers is, I think, a bit of a stretch in many cases, but they have killed the grandparents of the cows, pigs, turkeys who they're killing, and their own grandparents were maybe killers of non-human animals just like them. And it's kind of handed down generationally, that this is what our family does, and and these are the beings who we farm. It kind of actually helps us segue really well to this idea that I want to talk about, where people talk about veganism as a cult or as a religion. When you hear people say that, like, how do you dispel that? Like, I've heard people say kind of like, oh, I'm vegan, but it's not my religion. And these vegans will often, I say vegan very loosely in that case, but those people, they'll often be apologists and kind of be anti-activism kinds of vegans also. How do you deal with that? I guess, do you address those two things differently when people say it's a cult or a religion? Do you say, okay, let's examine a cult, let's examine a religion? And let me preface this question, I guess, by saying, not preface, but I guess postface the question by saying that cult, that's the root word for culture. And I think, like, when people say cult, maybe they're talking about like something that has some kind of negative connotations, like people wearing like cloaks or robes or something like that, with like, these torches, they're holding up torches put into the ground, and there's like a fire in the middle and weird entities floating out of the fire. Like, there's a very kind of like dark, borderline kind of sinister, mysterious kind of nature when you think about like the occult and things like that. I don't know if that's exactly what people are getting at when they say it's a cult, or are they just saying that it's like a hive mind?
I don't think they mean the pitchforks. I think most people know, kind of have a modern idea of cult when they think about cults, right? We had Jim Jones, we have Scientology, we have all these cults that are incredibly public these days. We had Nexium that broke down once the leader. It's one of the fastest dismantled cults in the world. It's lived only a couple of, maybe like a decade, I don't know. anyways, I think people don't think about those medieval things. I think they think about drinking the Kool-Aid and Jim Jones, and the atheists of the atheist elk think about actual religions, because to them religion and a cult is kind of the same thing. So the way so when I don't know about vegans who say I'm not religious about it. I don't care. Mostly I leave vegans alone. I don't care. Good for you. Okay, you don't like activists, fuck off. I usually don't try not to spend too much energy on vegans that I disagree with. I just like just let them be. Everybody can do their own kind of activism. It's okay that we don't disagree. It's in fact showing that we are not a cult, because we don't agree on almost fucking anything, right? So this means we are not a cult. All right,
Excellent point.
It's a good thing that we disagree, and it's okay for us to disagree. Just let everybody be, right? That's I mean, we can talk about stuff, right? But we shouldn't talk about stuff in a way that blows up the movement in the end of it, right? We all have to learn how to disagree a little bit, right? Including myself. I am still blow up sometimes. But when people call veganism a cult, it's coming from that place of having two objects. One of them is a cult, one of them is veganism, right? Having a trait or two similar in both objects, and saying therefore it's the same object, right? It's illogical to say that, because a cult has certain traits, and we know those traits, and there is a very big, very long and exhaustive list of what a cult looks like, and I went through it on my channel in the Bite Model series. And
what
then
traits do you think people are focusing on when they make that connection?
Proselytizing, only proselytizing, in my experience. Proselytizing, and the fact that sometimes vegans kind of sound the same. You know, we're saying the same stuff. So it must be a cult then. It couldn't be just that it's true. You know, so they're focusing on these things, and it's incredibly superficial, and they can even, the better of them can kind of go to the dictionary definition, and then kind of make the definition fit, and they have to really contort veganism into the definition. What I usually do is go for the epistemology, and in advance tell them, listen, I'm a little bit of a cult expert. I consider myself, because I'm obsessed with cults, and I learn as much as possible about cults. In fact, most of my time is spent learning more about cults. I can't believe that that's how I spend my time, but it's at this point a monster that has to be fed, I guess. So I immediately tell them, I go for the epistemology. Well, how did you get to that conclusion? Because I got to my conclusion that veganism is not a cult by doing the rigor, by going through it very extensively with a couple of people that joined me to do this. How did you reach that conclusion? Oh, by reading a fucking dictionary definition and then making veganism look like that, because that's your feelings. Oh, thanks, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also maybe like the approach that you say, I think is the approach that you're talking about with like getting them to deconstruct and go on from there, I think is a really effective way with some people who, you know, if they're of sober mind, I guess, so to speak. Like, I don't mean not under the influence of some things, but you know, if they're approaching the conversation in that way, I think also maybe sometimes in a lighter hearted way, we can say like, we can kind of take it and run with it. We can say like, yeah, it's our tofu eating cult or something like that, and kind of dispel the weight of it a little bit just by saying like, you know, if it is a cult, then it's the best cult. It's the cult devoted to nonviolence, or maybe nonviolence isn't even the correct
Yeah, I don't like doing that. And I'll tell you why. Because there are actual vegan cults. There are. Within veganism, there are cults, it's for sure. Within any group, there are many cults. I don't like doing that. I like going for the epistemology, because if it's a person that actually is considering stuff, they're probably saying something stupid that they heard somebody else saying, right? Veganism is a cult. They probably haven't thought about it in length. So when I'm asking them, well, how did you reach that conclusion? They then have to, if they actually decide to do the rigor, they then have to reconstruct how they got to that conclusion. And that makes them think, that makes them go read something, at least a dictionary definition, and hopefully reconsider, especially after I tell them, well, that shuts people up immediately. I went through the bite model, and no, it's not.
Do you think it's better, I'm just thinking out loud here, to say that it's, or to ask them rather how they reach that conclusion? Or do you think it might be better to ask them, what is a cult, or how do you define a cult?
No, I think the first one, because, well, it depends. I guess it depends on how the person wrote the accusation, right? But I think asking how they reached that conclusion, yeah, okay, hold on, let me think about it a little bit. I guess, so what was the second option?
Just asking them.
How define a cult?
Yeah, I refrain from saying what is a cult, because then they might misunderstand that and just say veganism, and then you're still kind of stuck there.
Yeah, stuck. Yeah, I don't see. You know what? After thinking a bit for a little bit, and I don't see a significant difference between the two questions. I think mine makes you sound a bit of a debate bro. I don't know if that's scary or makes people tremble in the boots. If it is, I think it's an advantage.
Right.
But
so let me sound like a debate bro here and say, VPM, how did you reach the conclusion, or how did you reach the conclusion that there are cults within veganism?
Sure. So I haven't gone through the rigor of the bite model, but I think I know it well enough to kind of. So again, I watch a lot of cults, and some things are starting to be, when you have a huge amount of knowledge, some things are starting to be kind of intuitive. Do I have, like, is somebody making me to go through the bite model for each thing that is a cult? No, because I wouldn't make that accusation, because I kind of don't care even, right? Those are fellow vegans. That's how they decide to do their shit. Fine. The fruitarian cults I have a problem with, but I think most of them are dispelled and dismantled, or at least expelled from veganisms. So yeah, there are small cults, activism cults, kind of that intuitively, and by intuition I mean I go into my base of knowledge and I retrieve that knowledge, but I don't go specifically through each account of what a cult is, but intuitively going into my knowledge and retrieving it. There are a few vegan cults, and I think it's pretty blatant. Yeah.
The fruitarian one is interesting. I myself followed a fruitarian diet for a little while, maybe like 5 years ago or so. And the way that I understood, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry if I have to. The fruitarian diet itself is not a cult. People create cults around fruitarian diets sometimes, and most of them I think are dispelled anyways. They broke up.
Yeah. So. But yeah, I think maybe like there can be certain ideas that people latch onto, whether it's the stuff that you eat, or the kind of activism you do, and maybe there's certain types of bonds that help to facilitate certain types of activism. With the fruitarian thing, it makes me think of this study that I had seen on, I think it was monkeys, where different groups of monkeys were kind of identified as belonging to like different I don't want to say cults, but like just different tribes, I guess, of monkeys based on just this one like tree pod kind of thing that they wouldn't eat. And when the ones like in a certain group would see that people within their group were eating that pod, they would smack it out of their hands and kind of like punish them for it. Food can be incredibly culture determining, you know?
Yeah.
It's just something else. So we kind of brushed on activism just ever so slightly there. I'm wondering if you have any ideas about what might be the most effective forms of activism, you know, among things like tabling or outreach, video outreach, disruptions, protests, leafleting, petition signature gathering, reaction videos, things like that. I know you make a lot of kind of reaction video type content. Is there anything
Me?
that,
Not
well,
so much.
oh, more than I have at least.
Okay. I don't have the answer to this question, which type of activism is good. And once again, I don't think it matters. I think a good activism is the one that you can do. I think each type of activism catches people in a different state of mind, and hopefully change that state of mind, whether it's at the beginning of journey or somewhere towards the end. Most of it is going to be ineffective. We should recognize that most of the activism is ineffective if our goal is to turn people into vegans. I think that shouldn't be the only goal, frankly. I think we should have intermediate goals as well. And in fact, I'm kind of working on that myself, on having creating little pieces of internet that are going to become like maybe like the first interaction of somebody with thinking about animals as individuals, right? So I think that's important as well, right? I remember my first thought about, oh, is this an individual, right? Is this animal an individual? And it still took me about 20 odd years to become vegan, right? To get there. But without that first thought, maybe I wouldn't have been right now, you know. More precisely, it took me about 2 years from knowing that I should be vegan to becoming a vegan. And I became a vegan through trauma. And I actually became a vegan not through interaction with vegans, but through interaction with carnists. So,
Wow.
yeah, so I'm actually right now I'm working on the type of activism that removes veganism from it a little bit. And I'm hoping it will become like one of those small seeds, small neuron interactions in people's minds. But we'll see. Yeah. So I don't know if there is a better activism than the other. The activism that you can and think is better to do, just do that.
I think that maybe there's some instances where people might do activism in a way where they're sending the wrong message. For example, if they're promoting like welfareist type things, then I guess there's instances where maybe especially early vegans or people who haven't thought through enough, or maybe they just don't have an abolitionist kind of a mindset.
Yeah.
I think there's instances where those can be harmful to the end goal.
So listen, I'm sorry for interrupting you,
Oh no,
because
all good.
I think I disagree. I think those people who are they're not advocating for welfareism, they're just talking in a welfarist language, right? They want people to go vegan. They want people to stop interacting with animals in this deathly way, right? They want people to leave the animals alone as well. They just use a language that would lead closer people to welfarism than it would lead directly to veganism. But I think also welfarism can lead people to veganism as well. I think there is a path there that somebody can take from a welfarist position into a vegan position much easier than from a fuck all animals position, right? So yeah, I think like so the young vegans who have in your opinion welfarist mindset,
Not all
I
of
do
them.
think it's a matter of semantic. I don't think it's a matter of actual thought process in most cases, because welfarism is a very specific thing. Welfarism, as you have said yourself, assumes that it's okay to exploit and kill animals for these trivial things like unnecessary food. And I think if a vegan is a vegan and living a vegan lifestyle, they don't accept that.
Yeah, I guess it kind of comes down to what they're wasting their time on if they don't accept that.
It's their time to waste. It's their time to waste, and I think that's the best way. So just give them a little bit of space, is what I'm saying. But I understand your implication. I think I probably should let you tell a bit more about it. So
Sure. I
sorry.
mean, so like I think about there's a group, for example, locally here in Chicago who recently did an action at Chipotle, I think, and then somewhere else where they talked about how Chipotle and this other restaurant had apparently made a promise by some year to go fully cage free with their chicken quote unquote products, and they were protesting outside of those restaurants, telling people, look, they're not cage free yet, like they said they would. They haven't fulfilled their promise. To me, it just seems like a fight that sends people the wrong message. It sends the idea that there's a right way to exploit animals or a better way to exploit animals. And this is something I run into a lot with non-vegans in kind of like street outreach scenarios where I can't tell you how many times they'll just say, well, we need to improve it. We need to do it better. We're doing it bad. The system needs reform. We need laws in place that are going to protect the interests of these animals more. I don't agree with foie gras. A lot of these practices are cruel, but I think that, and they treat you so, it's so patronizing. They'll be like, I think there's a humane way to do it. I think as long as we're doing it humanely, it's like they've already made their conclusion and then some. You know what I mean? And you're just getting like the lip service that you don't even want. Like lip service is bad enough in and of itself, but you're getting that lip service that like it's not even serving you. So when I hear that, I'm thinking like whoever is spreading this bullshit nonsense, like you see at the major grocery store in the U.S., Whole Foods, there's like 6 tiers of welfare, and if you get the level 6 one, it's like they've been pasture raised. I don't know exactly the different nuances of each step, but there's this idea abound about how you can kind of exploit animals in a more compassionate way. And I don't think that it's better for an animal to suffer more in their life. But I also think that when we think about the consequences of that mentality, and we see examples of this. I don't remember where it was, but somewhere in like one of those small European, Scandinavian countries, I heard about something about how the egg industry was majorly reformed and people started consuming more eggs because they thought that eggs are now totally fine, and that they don't involve all this unnecessary suffering. So I think we really can reach a future, and especially with brain implant technology, or maybe even AI, or further understanding of genetic modification and the implications on beings, like biological beings, animals. the capacity or the potential for that genetic engineering to affect things like sentience, for example, or nociceptor, capacity to feel physical pain. I think there's this crazy world that we can actually maybe see on the horizon. I don't want that world to come, but where non-human animals are actually rendered, quote unquote, less sentient, or where the system is so compassionate toward them. Like there's this Wagyu beef thing, I don't like to use the word beef, but where these cows are massaged and they're basically in like a spa. I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but they're getting a 5-star treatment, and supposedly that people like produces healthier meat and all this stuff. So that's what I'm afraid of, that welfareism is kind of leading to.
Okay, so yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I'm kind of with you, but here's my question to you as an actual street activist, which I'm not, right? So I can't speak from example. That's why I'm asking you. So you keep hearing this welfarist stance from carnists, right? From people who are not vegan. Would you say it's prevalent to have this welfarist position, even if it's tongue-in-cheek? Is it prevalent in most people?
It's yes, yeah.
Yes. So what if we stop fighting welfarism in this case? Let me finish. I know people are going to explode, but listen, this is what I mean. Listen to me to the end and don't crop this out of context. So what if we don't tell people don't be welfarist, right? What if we find an actual path from this thing they already believe, from this consideration of animals they already have, into abolitionism?
Yeah, and I try to do that. So what I usually do to bridge that is I say, why do you care about these animals at all? What is it about animals that you think makes them deserve this kind of treatment? And then I try to, as much as possible, I try to get people talking like a vegan. I try to get them to catch themselves standing up in a way, even if it's just in front of me where they're kind of like preaching to the choir. I try to get them to speak in a way where they're almost like a little mini me version of them in the future, standing up against the cultural norms.
Yeah. So there you go. So my point is actually, right, is to not take the stance that welfarism and abolitionism, again, in your mind, in theory, are two either separate or even opposite things, but to actually look at welfarism as something that you can prolong into abolitionism, and maybe find new clever ways to do it. But your way sounds amazing, right? So what are the reactions, if you can kind of summarize
I
it?
appreciate that. Normally people, they'll kind of like wince a little bit and just be like, because I'm asking them like, why don't you want to torture animals? And then they'll start to feel kind of like a little bit like they'll start to feel like they need to explain, like almost like they'll feel like I'm forcing them, I'm begging the question, I'm forcing them to kind of explain that they're not sadists or something like that. It doesn't always, it does still get them thinking. There's just a little bit of usually discomfort there, because I kind of flip it in that way, where now I'm getting them to make the case for treating sentient beings. I don't want to say with respect, but how would I say that? I guess like morally considering them. That doesn't exactly imply, but I don't like that either, because moral consideration can be a strictly mental exercise.
Yeah. Well, that's what it is, though, right? The practice is almost a separate thing. As we said, once they recognize morally that it's not the right thing to do according to their special subjective morals. The path into action is much easier, because then you can tell them, well, there are some things that you can't change, but this you absolutely can, and it's fucking easy, mate. It's 2024, or however you talk to people. I would be a terrible street activist. I would bite the head off. I would get upset really fast as well. So I shouldn't do that. So I'm doing something else. That's fine.
I think I appreciate that, and you never know. But in any case, what you said about when I talked about their Carnus reason for wanting to give animals, and then kind of this dynamic, like whatever violent action is happening or whatever that relationship is. I think you bring up a good point in maybe in the idea that it's good to maybe keep it in a very intellectual sense, in a non-action related sense, because then they're only having to operate in terms of confronting their ideas rather than having to defend behaviors.
Yeah.
And in that way also, I'm not making assumptions. For example, the Carnus says, well, I think that there's a good way to do it. And, and I say, well, what do you think it is about non-human animals that even sets some kind of a good way or a bad way? Like what, almost like, what's the metric, or what determines,
What's
like
the trait?
why do you care?
Are you trying to say trait?
No, maybe, I'm not sure. But I try to just say, like, what is it about them that means that they shouldn't be, and in that case, then I run into issues, because I don't want to say that they shouldn't be abused or things like that. I don't want to make it nebulous. So I think that, and if I bring in specific actions, like they shouldn't have their tails docked, or they shouldn't be in cages or something like that, it can become too much of a matter, like I was saying, to give you credit for that idea, that it becomes too much of a matter of specific actions or specific objects, and it brings it outside of, like you say, it's the really easy thing. Like it's 2024, it's easy just to make that switch in your mind where you give them moral consideration. And of course, by asking that question, I'm not getting them all the way there, but I'm keeping it in that realm of mental processes where hopefully they can see that this isn't something that they need to overcome in terms of fighting something happening in the world. They can literally just fight that conclusion. They can learn to disagree with that practice.
So here's how I would ask this, right? A person says, well, we should do it better somehow. We should exploit and kill animals better somehow, more humanely. I do think I would still go for epistemology, and I would ask them nicely, the way you can do it, and I don't necessarily am able to, is how they reached the conclusion that animals should be, I don't know, less exploited or less killed, however you say it. But I would ask them, well, how did they get to that conclusion? Because most of the time, right, this is one of the things I was talking about. It's automated knowledge. It's something that they heard, it sounded good, it helped them to continue to eat meat and other animal products, and now they just regurgitate it to whoever ever asks, right? This is not something that they need to think about. But if you ask them the question, well, how did you get there? What was your consideration path, I guess, to consider animals at all? Well, that hopefully will get them out of automated knowledge and into cognitive knowledge, into actually thinking about the answer. I don't know.
I might be getting hung up on definitions here, but do you think it's accurate to call it a conclusion, or would it be more accurate to call it a belief, or do you think they're just interchangeable?
I think if you're talking if you're in a country that doesn't have much, or you in the US, Yeah. I don't know. I have to think about. I think belief is a bit of a loaded word, especially among religious folks, right? And if you say belief, you actually might trigger a tangent into religion. Whereas maybe conclusion, yeah, I think conclusion is a good word.
Or maybe not even saying something like, how did you get there? You
Yeah,
know, how did you arrive? I'll try that. I mean, I think you're onto something in wanting to avoid. You know, it's the whole idea. I see Veganica in the chat. I think we had referred to this in our live stream the other day, where, you know, the neurons that wired together fired together. And I think similar actually to what you were saying about how you hope to create content that kind of brings people like into that thought process, almost like in an intermediate way of seeing other animals as people. Veganica is making content that can kind of appeal to non-vegans who are interested in other subjects, but then kind of like inserting things that get people to think about, you know, the situation of other animals. And I want to just touch on, I know we're kind of running a little short on time, but I just want to talk about the idea of like people who kind of abandon veganism. Do you think that those people, like, there's that whole no true Scotsman fallacy where people say, oh, they were never vegan, and it's almost become like, among anti-vegans, it's become like a meme by this point where,
yeah,
you know, they'll just say like, you know, they'll say like they were you know, capital letters, exclamation point 111, you know, like they were never vegan, kind of a thing. Do you think that's accurate, to say that somebody was never vegan, or do you think that you can kind of change, I don't know, change how you know, can you become
yeah,
can you be a feminist and then be like, no,
yeah,
you know, fuck women's rights? Or like, can you
yeah,
become an environmentalist and then say, you know, I don't give a shit, and throw trash out your car on the
yeah.
highway? You can?
All those things that you're saying, I've seen it happen. I've seen a person who was incredibly passionate about environmentalism becoming one of the biggest polluters in the fucking world. He basically turned into a single-use everything at some point, and I was living with him at the time in the same house. I know feminists who turned into anti-feminists.
Wow.
I am surrounded by ex-vegans quite a lot, and some of them you can claim and you can prove that they were never vegan. I think in most cases of uh, social social media persons, you can prove that substantially. I do know people who had the vegan ethics and they changed their mind on that. And it can happen. And I don't know why something got broken. But definitely one of the people who, while herself already being an ex-vegan, she said something that really started the chain. When I told you that for 2 years I knew that I should be vegan, she started that chain. And she became vegan when she was 16 because she was very politically active at the time on the left side. She was a leftist, and it's something that leftists did. And she was the one that for the first time ever, basically, told me in this general term of animals are kind of fucked in the farm, like in the agriculture, in animal agriculture. And that's the thing that started my journey.
Wow.
And she was ex-vegan, and now she was a vegetarian at the time, and now she's full omnivore. I don't know what happened there. I'm actually half thinking of interviewing her on my channel, but I need to become better at staying calm while talking to people. So, but yes,
So you're saying it is
people,
possible.
yes,
Yeah. What do
yes,
you think of
absolutely.
this? Makes me think a little bit about the idea that you were saying earlier about how we shouldn't kind of focus on how other vegans are doing their activism or the things that we disagree on, kind of like actually strengthening us and making veganism actually more strong. And it almost seems like, practically thinking those things are an inevitability as veganism hopefully goes more mainstream. We're going to have people with varying opinions and beliefs and different orientations toward the world, and maybe even like people who are bigoted in some ways and maybe even proud of it, but they just happen to reject the commodity status of non-human animals. Do you think that it's but on the other hand, I guess if there's somebody who, like, if we're talking to someone who they say, oh, I'm vegetarian and I don't drink milk anymore because I'm lactose intolerant. I occasionally will eat a little bit of cheese. I come across these people a lot. And they're like, sometimes my doctor also said I should have eggs for protein. So if that's, and of course, like, they probably still eat honey. They probably still buy products tested on animals. They probably still wear animals and things like that. I've seen vegans in outreach say things like, oh, you're almost there. You're so close. You just need to, let these things go out of your life and then you're there. Do you think that that's a good strategy? Or do you think that that kind of, I guess my question's a little bit two-part. Like, do you think that we should focus on these people because they maybe are truly almost there? Or do you think that, and by extension of that, we should focus our attention on people who are, grilling pigs and cows and stuff every day? That's the one part of the question. And then the other part is, do you think that it's maybe harmful for that person's conceptualization of veganism to tell them that they're almost there? Because we never want to get into this idea of scrutinizing each little action. It gets tough.
Yeah. So here's the thing. The first part of your question. Well, actually, I'm just going to enter and we'll see where we get.
Go for it.
Yeah. So when they say you're almost there, I don't mind them saying that, but I just don't think they're correct, right? Because they're talking about the practical side of this. Yeah. They're almost there because they only consume a small amount of products, but the person could be farthest from the truth. Yes. The furthest from vegan ethics, right? Or absolutely. Even, yeah. So you almost is a problem. I would again, it's just my favorite way to go about it. I would again go for their epistemology and actually go into trying to find why they're vegetarian. And in most cases, when they're like that, it's not going to be ethics, right? And if it's not ethics, then you have to treat this person with just regular carnist, because they are not eating certain things because of practical stuff, but mentally they're carnist. So you have to start from the beginning, right?
Yeah, it's almost kind of like, oh, sorry, were you still?
It's okay.
I was just saying, it's almost like our goal is to get a certain number of people ethically convinced that turning living sentient animals into food or other products or otherwise exploiting them and using them as a means to an end is unethical, and reach a kind of critical mass where hopefully there's some kind of Bill of Rights or something like that that does establish a legal precedent, to refer to when it comes to the rights of non-human animals. I say rights loosely, but I guess legal rights. Yeah. And from that point, maybe a lot of people will be dissuaded. Like, there's people who say, if eating meat became illegal tomorrow, I would have no problem with it, that kind of thing. But since it is legal and since everybody's doing it, I'm just going to go along with it. And, those people, they wouldn't be vegan, but at that point, like, it wouldn't matter, because it would matter in a sense. It would matter, I think, in terms of social harmony. Like, I don't think it's, even if abusing or maybe exploiting is a more accurate, non-human animals was outlawed, I don't think it's a particularly beneficial thing to have people in your society who are in favor of turning other animals into sandwiches and stuff, like if they could.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a particularly healthy dynamic. So I think there'd still be work to do, but I think that's kind of the natural progression of how things are going to go. I mean, if you look at other pro-justice movements' successes, things getting banned, like the sale of new fur, for example, in California now. Obviously, not everybody's in favor of it, but since it's legally mandated, people either have to go around and do something illegal, or they just have to obey the mandate.
Yeah, here's the thing. This is a bit of trying to read the future, and we don't have access to that technology. You know what I mean? So the only way to go about it and say we don't know, we can speculate and base our activism on that. And that's about the extent of our ability, in my opinion. So I think at least some activists should concentrate on the low-hanging fruit. And I think ethical vegetarians are a low-hanging fruit. Maybe. A lot of people went through vegetarianism into veganism.
Yeah,
I personally didn't.
I did.
Yeah.
I think there's also low-hanging fruits in terms of causes, like foie gras, for example, or like the use of like elephants in circuses. It's kind of a disturbing image to a lot of people to see the foot of an elephant, like, in a chain.
Yeah.
Fur industry is maybe the lowest hanging one there.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying, whichever activism you find the most compelling, go do that. Or if you can't do activism, go support those activists, right? And let's give everybody room to do the activism that they think is good, is progressing the cause, even if most of us don't think that it's good. It doesn't matter, right? It's gonna inflict something. It's gonna do something. It could be even that a specific person. Okay, let's talk about it. So that vegan teacher is the most hated person on the internet at this point. So I don't even actually know if she made people vegan. I reckon she did. But even you can even use a personality like that vegan teacher, as harsh as it is to say, oh, PETA, that almost everybody hates until an animal they like is abused, and then they're like, let's go PETA. But you can almost use them as single them out and continue with your own activism. You know what I don't know if I'm making things clear.
When you say single them out, do you mean?
Yeah. If somebody, oh, what do you think about that vegan teacher? Yeah. You can say whatever. You can say, she's doing a good job. She's doing her own thing. Not all vegans are like that. And, consider veganism not through the lens of one singular person, but through ethics, right? Or you can say, yeah, but that vegan teacher absolutely sucks, but that doesn't mean that veganism is a bad thing or is not true or whatever, right? So you can even use the activists that you don't like to create a space to talk about vegan ethics.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was very active at one point when on Discord, when Discord was letting people run public stages. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you the number of kids who would come in and say, what do you think of that vegan teacher? What do you think of that vegan teacher? That would be their first question. Like maybe a good 3 out of 5 people who would get invited up to the stage. They would say something about that vegan teacher and ask your opinion. And some of the activists kind of said, well, she got you here, didn't she? She got you talking to a different vegan and, learning more about it.
That's an amazing response. Yeah. Use what you have, including the activists you don't like. Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering if you've heard of the radical flank effect.
Can you say that again? Sorry.
It's called the radical flank effect. It's basically this idea. I'm not sure who coined the term, but it's basically this idea that there's some value to having people who are kind of more on the fringes or more extreme in their tactics, for the people who are kind of more in the middle. In other words, the people who are more in the middle, they're referred to in this model as the quote unquote rational moderates, where you get to then set an example. It's kind of like, when people say, well, I don't think that vegans should be promoting their cause this way, and you guys are making veganism look bad, and I'm less likely to go vegan because of you. You can say, well, go vegan and don't be like me. Go vegan and be the moderate, reasonable person that you say that you are.
It's all an excuse anyways, right? It's all a fucking excuse. When you get down to it, when you say something like that, it's becoming incredibly apparent in about a second that they don't really give a shit about it, right? They're not going to become that's not going to happen. They're not going to become vegan due to become the antithesis to Miss Katie, right? So it's just one more excuse it's one more tangent to get rid of.
Yeah, I think they're more saying that it's not that they don't have a desire to be the antithesis. You have to almost like try to spur them toward that direction. I think they're more just saying that they don't want to be associated with people like some person. But I think there's also a great value in showing people, modeling things socially and showing them. And this is kind of pertinent to the radical flank effect, where we're being a model of a person who's, let's say, we're not the people who are disruptive and throwing blood on people with fur coats and screaming at people and stuff. Those people, in a way, are making a great social sacrifice by setting one example that then someone can come in and say, look, my shirt says vegan on it too, but like, I'm a normal, well-rounded, emotionally regulated person. And then they're like, oh, you're not like those other vegans I saw, but this is starting to make sense. Like, you kind of see that a little bit, where that person, it's almost like an extreme version of foot in the door technique, where they'll kind of like blast the gates open, and then you'll just be out, like kind of walking up the driveway being like, hey, I'm vegan too. But VPM, I know that we're hitting your time that you got to stop. And for anybody watching live, Vegan Postmortem is going to be with Chip on his channel, Vegan Power Lab. So be sure to catch them on that channel too. And VPM, thanks so much for being here. And this was a lot of fun. I think the conversation flowed really, really well. And we got a lot of ideas across. It's one of those things that I think it would even be to my benefit to watch again and just kind of solidify my understanding of the things that you were articulating and the consequences on my activism. And I hope that I was able to get these ideas out of your brain without being too demanding of your mental faculties, I guess.
I just don't want the stolen valor. I don't want people to think that everything that I say must be the absolute truth. I don't want people to think that I'm smarter than I am. I'm a bit of a dumbass who happens to know a little bit about a little bit. That's all.
I hear that sentiment, and there's this idea that some people know something about everything, and then some people know everything about nothing, and maybe it's good to just fall somewhere in between.
Okay.
But anyway, I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate the wonderful interaction. And I hope that everybody who's watching this, whether they're watching live or watching later, go and subscribe to Vegan Postmortem, VEGAN, and then POSTMORTEM here on YouTube. And are you on other platforms as well?
Yes, I am on Instagram, both with Vegan Postmortem, but I'm not really active there. I'm more active on my Instagram Harmsteader, which is like homesteader, but with harm in it.
HARM. Okay.
Yeah. I do have Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. I do write some interesting threads sometimes. Yeah, and one more thing, it's a bit of a call to action. Guys, if you want to do digital activism, some of it in the hope to turn people vegan, some of it in the hope to move people closer in the other direction. But basically, if you would like to stop being in vegan bubbles on social media and want to actually find a way to interact with actual people, yeah, DM me or email me. Get me somewhere. I'm incredibly available everywhere. And yeah, join my Discord server and we can get started.
I didn't know you had a Discord server, and
Yeah.
how can they just find that with by searching Vegan Postmortem?
Not really. I'm a bit selective on whom I'm getting in there. I
I see.
also have very strict rules in there. No politics, no entity on each other, no gatekeeping, no arguing about shit, stuff like that.
Did you
Just
say
do
no NTT?
Yeah, on each other, on each other, on each other. I just don't want people to fight about what veganism is and stuff like that. I just don't want that to get in the way. I just want people to concentrate on doing activism. There are plenty of projects to work on. You can definitely find one that you like and you can contribute to. And I keep popping the ideas in there. So just DM me. I just want people to agree to the terms before I send them the invite link. So it's not an open Discord. It's a closed Discord that is created to do digital activism in all forms, basically.
That's beautiful. I think there's a lot of wisdom also in having a cap on, who can join, because you just cannot have like a safe, private space otherwise where you can actually talk strategy, because people are just very good at like raiding and distracting and things like that. I remember in that vegan server that I had described, there was actually most of the people on that server were not vegan. And then there was a vegan section where people had to basically go through an interview and verify that they were vegan. So I completely understand that sentiment. Well, thanks again for joining us. And I'll go ahead and end the stream now. And then everybody head over to the Vegan Power Lab channel, Chip's channel in 25 minutes. If you're watching this live, it'll be at 11:30 Central Time or whatever time you're in 25 minutes from now. And hopefully we'll see each other there. VPM, thanks again so much for joining, and take care. And hopefully, we'll see each other in each other's comment sections and things like that. I'm always up for considering different ideas and things like that. So any comments, critiques, anything like that, just shoot them over my way.
Thank you, Haz.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Peace out.